Hello, everyone. My name is Taja Howell, and I'm currently a preschool ESC teacher at ARC Broward. And I'm currently finishing up my capstone on action research. And our class was supposed to make and present a research project based on what can help teaching and learning in the community and in the school. And I decided to make a act my go with my accent research project on structured calm down routines and emotional regulation in my preschool ESC class. Um, so just moving on. So why I chose this problem. I always struggled with connecting to the students that had high social emotional regulation challenges, especially coming into as a new teacher, a new preschool teacher at that. I had a lot of students that needed that self-regulation skill and needed that sensory support, but I just didn't know how to connect with them or to know what skills they needed for me to teach them how to self-regulate themselves. So a little context on why I chose this. In my preschool ESC classroom, emotional dysregulation was a daily challenge. Students frequently experienced meltdowns, aggressive outbursts, and emotionally flooding, which created safety concerns for peers and staff and disrupting the learning environment for all. So the difficult transitions and low engagement compound the whole issue. And without these consistent tools to self-regulate, students struggle to participate meaningfully. So they will lose that time to connect with me because they just didn't know how to self-regulate themselves and to calm themselves down whenever they get into the process of either, and like I said, like those behaviors, they'll hit themselves or they'll hit others, or they'll even show behaviors toward the teachers and staff. So that's what I mean by impacting their instructional environment. This pattern motivated me to investigate structure calm down routines as a proactive, evidence-informed intervention. So my classroom context, I have about 13 students, or I did my data based off 13, between 10 and 13 students. It's a preschool ESC classroom serving ages 3 to 5. Cognitively, my students are very low. So I say 3 to 5, but really their academic and self-regulate, their social and emotional, they're really, really low. So the class size ranges from approximately, like I said before, 8 to 13 students with diverse developmental and sensory needs. I have one student with cerebral palsy, and that's where my most of my data came from because he couldn't do much, but he was saying a lot based off of his behaviors, or as him hitting himself. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to create this intervention, because it was a lot of behaviors shown that he was trying to communicate to me and my staff, but we just didn't know what he wanted. And then going into the environment, it's a sensory-rich learning environment designed with visual support, calming corners, and structured routines to support emotional and behavior regulation. So my classroom is very sensory-based. My specific room is the only room that has sensory toys and sensory wall manipulatives for students to play with. So my class in the school is, they call it the sensory class. So they put the sensory need students in my class because of that, the environment that I have. So my guiding question in this intervention is, what is the impact of structured calm down routines on emotional regulation in preschool EC students ages 3 to 5? This study explores whether consistent or teacher-led routines reduce dysregulation episodes and improve coping skills. So my purpose was to design, implement, and evaluate a structured calm down routine invention that supports self-regulation safety and engagement in a preschool classroom environment. So my research design, I wanted to go off of a qualitative design approach. I really wanted to go the qualitative route because my students don't really it's hard to get data on them quantitatively. So I wanted to base off my research strategies on take mainly teacher observation, taking my skills accusation sheets that I do on the daily, whether if it's a plus or minus sign, or whether they did mastery on the calm down routine, or a negative meaning they did not do mastery. I wanted to collect my data in two phases. So the first phase was collecting baseline data. So basically collecting data before the calm down routine intervention was implemented. And I wanted to collect that because, like I said, most of my students that are in my class that come in, they are needing that sensory input. And they need that sensory, their behaviors are more escalated. They can't sit down for too long. They get frustrated easily. Their attention span is not too long. So I have got a lot of data from my baseline. So that will help me to implement the intervention, which is phase two, and measure responses after implementing the structured calm down routines. And I did the calm down routine three times daily with each student. And then my method, my action research was selected because it allows the teacher or the researcher to study real classroom challenges and adapt strategies in real time and generate practical knowledge directly applicable to the preschool ESC environment. This cycle process supports both student outcomes and professional growth for teachers and students. So the intervention. So each calm down session lasted about 10 minutes and was implemented 3 times daily during morning circle, post recess transition, and then end of day, kind of like around they get up from nap time to build consistency and emotional regulation habits. And then my core components was sessions integrated 4 key supports, which was emotion identification activities, visual cue cards, sensory tools like fidgets, weighted items, breathing visuals, and structured communication prompts to name and express their feelings. Emotion, visual, sensory supports, and guided communication prompts were embedded in each session. Students practiced naming feelings using picture boards and calming strategies such as deep breathing and squeeze tools, reinforcing self-regulation across the whole school day. So when I did the intervention, I didn't pick a specific student that I was going to implement the calm down routine. Um, since I know my students, I know certain triggers that they have. So in my data, I didn't say, oh, this student is going to be doing the calm down routine today. No. I wanted to do it based off on real time and real data. I want to make my data very real. So I had one particular student who got his behaviors escalated at a certain time. And so I implemented that calm down routine with him. And as the intervention went on and it was very consistent with him, it worked in certain settings, and that's what I will go into and which setting it worked on or where it was successful. So how I track the data in my observation, I had daily, like I said, mentioned before, I had daily observation sheets and skill tracking logs capturing student responses to calm down routines. Field notes documented behavioral patterns, emotional cues, and teacher-student interactions across baseline and the intervention phases. I used the triangulation and coding method as well. Data was collected in between three different data sources, which was my observation sheets, my skill logs, and my field notes. And then open coding identified recurring patterns, which were grouped into themes such as self-regulation, adult prompting, and sensory response effectiveness. So my major findings, so in the baseline phase, I noticed students showed frequent emotional outbursts, difficulty with transitions, and limited self-regulation. Dysregulation disrupted circle time and peer interactions with minimal use of coping strategies observed. Like I said, I noticed in the baseline, um, my students had difficulty with the transitions, and sometimes when one student is showing escalated behaviors, it knocks off the whole scenery of, for instance, my circle time. So when one student is off schedule or just not having a good day, then most of the time all of my students are like that or will copy that behavior. So that's was the base of my baseline data and what pattern I've seen. And then in phase two with my intervention, following the structured calm down routine, students demonstrated improved emotional responses, increased use of visual supports, and greater engagement. I noted that calmer transitions and more consistent self-regulation attempts. So I did notice that from my baseline data and my intervention phase, that when I implemented the calm down routines in a group setting, it was more effective than it was me doing one-on-one with the students. So when I say one-on-one, it's like I'm just working with one or two students at a table, and I'm doing morning work or fine motor manipulatives with them to work on their IEP goal. And the other student is very not having a good day, then I have my TA or me will go in and implement that calm down routine, and it was not as effective than it was in a group setting. And I say this because the group setting, it was, more kids and it was more staff on hand. And me as a teacher, I was implementing those same calm down interventions in my circle time. And I had more sensory support and more visuals um to keep the same pattern of them being self-regulated. And if one student had an outburst or was just dysregulated, my TAs will step in quickly and implement that calm down routine. And sometimes the student will come back to the group and will be fine after that intervention. But I noticed when I was in one-on-one, it was not as effective. And I think because it was attention seeking behavior, and it wasn't me and other students in front of them, so they're seeking that attention, seeking that sensory, but I think it was just more attention seeking behavior, whether it was in the group. They knew that they were getting that support from me and my other teacher assistants. So my key findings, this is my data display. So like I said, it came off based off my skills sheet where I put a plus and a negative. Um, so it was 60% mastery, the effective rate in circle time, and 50% in a 101 setting. So it was kind of close, but like I said, it was more effective when it was in a group setting rather than whether if it was in a one-on-one setting. So the emerging themes that I noticed was it included increased use of visual cues, improved peer modeling, and greater teacher consistency, and reduce escalation time during transition periods as well. So, further on what the findings mean. So, a sensory rich language diverse ESC classroom requires more than a universal strategy. So, the active teacher engagement and co-regulation were the most consistent predicates of student success during the calm down routine. So, like I said, in the group setting, I was there front and center, and the students were more prone to, if they had that dysregulation behavior, my TAs were fast to come in and implement the calm down routine, or I will do it as a teacher and provide that sensory support. So small group settings introduce unique challenges like peer dysregulation was contagious and transitions between activities required additional scaffolding. And findings suggest that routine fidelity and consistent adult responses are essential for sustained emotional and regulation gains. So, the reason why we are doing this project, we're trying to implement different teaching and learning strategies. And I believe this will be a good um, start off for other teachers to implement this in their classrooms as well. So with my classroom practice, it embedded 10-minute calm down routines three times daily, use of visual emotional charts, sensory tools, and consistent communication prompts to build self-regulation in ESC preschool settings. And my research project aligned with the FELS domain. And that's what, as a teacher, I follow for my students, because the FELS, the Florida standards, the Florida education standards, we have for to make our students' IEP goals. It's for my students, they need to reach certain milestones, but I know they won't exactly reach, the social and emotional regulation goal. But if I get them there, if they're only 3 to 4 years or 8 to 18 months, I think that's what it is. It's still something that they can meet. So I follow that like a Bible. So it'll help me see where they're at. And I use the FEL specifically to help me create the calm down routines and create the strategies um, and skills to help make those routines and help me adapt to my own classroom. Because I know not the FELS doesn't fit my class as it doesn't it's a little too high for my class, but I still use it to see where my students are at. So that was a big help for me to make this intervention and to further on my research. So like I said, its structure supports address the IEP goals and promote inclusive, transformative classroom environments. So I really do believe this research can be used in a different setting, probably in the same setting as preschool and maybe ESC as well. Professional development emotional regulation strategies equips educators to reduce the dysregulation, improve transitions, and foster engagement across the ESC preschool continuum. So what was different about my project? So we started our proposal early in the spring, and now we're turning in our final this time around. And what was the major difference was how I was collecting my data, how I was testing fidelity of the data, making sure that everybody was on the same page. That would Making sure everybody was on the same page was the major difference, because I was at first in my proposal, I was putting all the data on like the main data. I was going to be collecting the main data, and my professor gave me advice to break it up into to tell me how I can collect make sure it's no like fidelity checks, and making sure everybody was on the same page, so there was no misinterpretation of the data. Because if I'm doing something different and my other TA is doing something different with collecting the data or implementing the calm down routine, then it would be no sense of implementing the project or the calm down routines, and if nobody's on the same page, and the students are not learning. So that was the main difference from my spring proposal and then to now. Is really how I was collecting the data and how I was presenting it as well. And then, yeah, so that is the end. That is my action research project. I'm hoping to continue to use this routine in my second year of teaching, and just hoping that other educators are able to use it as well, because I do believe all students are able to learn how to dysregulate themselves and to use social and emotional strategies and to learn social and emotional as a whole. And I feel like that should start from pre-K all the way up, so students are able to be a positive citizen here in this world. And and it starts somewhere. So I really hope this is a help to the community, and I thank you for listening. Thank you.